Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, live on Cardiff City World. As always, on a Sunday evening, we've rewatched the game. We take it in. We deep dive into it. But before we get to the game and the upcoming game against Wrexham, I have a very special guest, which is a bit unusual for a Sunday. But we like to mix it up now and again. I'm delighted to be joined by author and journalist Mr. Paul Abbandonato. How are you, mate?
Very well, thanks.
Good to have you on the show. So before we get into the the Bolton game and the overreactions or underreactions, depending on how you look at it, they're always balanced here. But there's definitely been a reaction on social media, as always. We'll get to all that later. We'll obviously look towards the Wrexham game on Tuesday as well, which I'm really looking forward to, I've got to say. I wanted to talk to you about your book, which is right by here behind my head, In the Dragon's Den by Paul Abbandonato, which is available at elofa.com and other bookstores. But if you cannot understand my accent or you don't speak Welsh, I'm going to flick that across the screen now. So you'll see it there. That book is available right now to purchase. Paul, talk to me about this book. First of all, what gave you the impetus to write a book about 30 years covering Wales? As in, when I say that, why now? Why not, 10 years ago? Why was now the right time?
Somebody mentioned to me about the extraordinary story that Welsh football has been, and let's compartmentalize that to Wales for now, because that's what the book is about. Although obviously there are some odd Cardiff, Swansea, and Wrexham stories in there. It is ostensibly about Wales, and we were just chatting about everything, and it was only when sort of looking at this that you realise what a truly extraordinary, surreal, unique football story like no other covering Wales has been. Now, I've covered the team for 30 years, as you say, and you just go with the flow in your job, story by story, week by week, month by month. But when you actually sit back and analyse what's happened and package it together over a 3-decade period rather than 1 decade or 2 decades, you just realise it's just an extraordinary tale that really deserves to be shared with the public at large. So you've had the situation with Ryan Giggs and Gary Speed, two popular young managers doing brilliant jobs with Wales, who were each lost to the job in different ways. That doesn't happen to other countries, Simon. It's just and the poor FAW left to pick up the devastating pieces from both of those situations. They went from the biggest underachievers in world football, when you think of the stellar talent available in the 90s and the start of the new millennium. So, you're talking about Ian Rush and Neville Southall and Mark Hughes and Kevin Ratcliffe, Ryan Giggs. Then you've got Craig Bellamy, Gary Speed, Gareth Bale, and they just weren't qualifying for anything, whereas Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland were regularly qualifying, and Welsh fans were kicking their heels of frustrations. They went from the biggest underachievers to the biggest overachievers. When they did get to Euro 2016, they were on page to the semi-finals quite unexpectedly and to number 8 in the world, ahead of crack teams like Spain, Italy, Germany, as I recall. They went from Mark Hughes' first home game in charge was against Switzerland, a European qualifier against Switzerland at the racecourse. Barely 5,000 fans turned up. So Wales were amongst the lowest supported countries in Europe at the time. And within a matter of a few months, they become the best supported country in Europe, with regular 74,000 sellouts at the Millennium Stadium over a period of time. No, because Wembley was being, I remember researching at the time, no other country was drawing those attendances. Not Italy, not Spain, not Germany. England would have been, but Wembley was being rebuilt at the time, so they didn't have a ground big enough to match that. There's the extraordinary story of what happened during Euro 2016. There's the extraordinary tales that happened during a 4-year spell that Bobby Gould was in charge. which included a fight with his own centre forward in front of the rest of the squad. A whole raft of issues. I just speaking to sort of people, and publishers agreed that this is just an incredible tale that needed to be put out there, if you like. But also, because of the nature of my job, I've just been privileged to actually have what I call the best seat in the house during this. And the book is sold by the publishers along the lines of it takes you right inside the dressing room and up into the boardroom corridors of power. Now, obviously, there's an awful lot of things that I will keep private, that are off the record over that period of time, and it will remain that way. But there are also a lot of unknown tales that can be told for the first time now, and with fresh interviews from people right at the centre of some of this drama, if you like. So it's just there to be told it's a story like no other in football, really, and it's just out there now for the first time, and people will make judgments as they see fit, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you mentioned obviously the difficult times when we had some exceptional talent in the squad, but you also, you were privy to many ups and many downs. Obviously, 2016 being the large up in many ways. But it was interesting. As you know, I hosted an evening with Neville Southall last weekend, and I made the mistake, maybe potentially, I don't know, but of bringing up Bobby Gould. Didn't have a good word to say about him, in all fairness, but like that period of the Welsh national team was, what's the word? I was going to say traumatic, but I don't know what the best word is. It was chaotic. It was difficult. Like, how many? How can I put this? How behind the scenes will your book take us in the like the Gould era or the other eras with those sort of behind the scenes stories? Because obviously, as a journalist, you would have been privy to a lot of it. Some off the record, some on the record. You know all about the ups and the downs, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it a lot, as I say, it's in the dressing room and up in the boardroom corridors of power. So how Gould got the job in the first place, which he wasn't supposed to. The job was going to one of Brian Flynn or Ron Atkinson, with Howard Kendall as another possibility, but it was due to go to those two. But Bobby got it instead. So we detail exactly how the power brokers came to that. There's a lot of stuff that I've previously spoken to Bobby about that is being utilised here. About these very instances. So he made Vinnie Jones captain for when Wales got battered 7-1 in the net against the Netherlands. And if it wasn't for Nev, it would have been 20. Trust me, it was the game of his life. And he certainly wasn't at fault for any of the 7 that flew in. Caused a lot of controversy because there was a feeling that he gave it a dressing room vote, for example. And there was a feeling that they couldn't work out where Vinny had got the votes from. But Bobby's quite openly spoken about that. Said, I was accused of not fixing it, but that sort of thing. I can't remember the exact word that he used. It's in the book. But he talks about that in detail. He talks in detail about his fight with John Hartson that he called at the training ground. So after that Netherlands game, he dropped John for the next game against Turkey, which was a home match. And he talks about how as he went out to the training ground, all I could hear was Hartson this, Hartson that. So he invited him for what he calls a rough and tumble, which is what they used to do at Wimbledon with the crazy gang. And he, basically it's in effect a fight with no punching, no kicking, no biting, no scratching. Rough and tumble, he calls it. And he talked, Bobby's really given incredible insight about how at one point he was on the ground with Hartson, who he calls a big old strong thing, and at one point he looked up and he saw Mark Hughes jumping up and down, saying, "Come on, John." He saw Ryan Giggs jumping up and down. Sort of never seen them so animated. So there's a lot of those tales. There was what I call the mother of all dressing room dressing downs with his captain Gary Speed after a 4-0 beating in Tunisia, where Gary just left nothing out, just ripped into the manager. Again, Bobby sort of talks about that. And his take is that Gary's the sort of person who was a very passionate person, and if you say things in the right way, it can be respected. And he felt within the confines of the dressing room that was fine at the time, even though it was a bit of a shake for him. So there's a lot, but there's a lot more on top of that as well. As about throwing Robbie Savage out of the squad on the morning of a game against Italy. He went into detail on that for me. So there's a lot in there. But I think the important thing to stress here, Si, is that Welsh football did not begin in 2016, contrary to what a lot of people think. There was a long, painstaking, very, very difficult route, full of, as you say, ups and downs to get there first. And the first manager I dealt with was just before Bobby Gould. Actually, it was Terry Yorath, and we can remember. Those of us can still painfully remember losing a 1993 win or bust qualifier at the Arms Park against Romania. Wales would have got, that was a classic sliding doors moment. Wales would have gone to the World Cup, and I really think that team would have taken off in exactly the same way that the Euro 2016 team did. Those players, Giggs, Rush, Hughes, Southall, they were made for that stage. Instead, from being 90 minutes away from unprecedented heights, if you like, they just went into the wilderness under Mike Smith and then Bobby Gould for a number of years. The same happened with Mark Hughes. He was in charge. There was a playoff game against Russia at the Millennium Stadium. It was lost. Instead of going to Euro 2004, where I'm again convinced those players would have done really well. Giggs, Craig Bellamy was on the scene then. Gary Speed was doing well. Danny Gabardon had come through. I'm convinced they would have done really well at that tournament in Portugal, but instead, Wales entered the wilderness years again for the best part of a decade. It really has been a complete boom bust roller coaster.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been boring. You mentioned the input from Bobby Gould. Obviously, a lot of the input and the stories around the book are going to come from yourself, but you also had a lot of input from other names within Welsh football and the history of Welsh football. Are you able to sort of give us an insight into people who've helped you with the book and given you even more insight into some of the instances and anecdotes and stories that you've been able to put into the book?
I can and I can't. I mean, a lot of it, people wanted to talk with a bit of anonymity, but there are people quoted at length in the book as well. So Chris Coleman's number 2, Ocean Roberts, has gone through incredible detail about how Gary Speed revolutionized things when he became manager, and has gone through game by game at how Chris Coleman took things on, and he's gone through game by game what happened with the Euros, with unknown stories of what happened in the games that took Wales all the way through to the semi-final against Portugal. John Toshak has talked in detail about bringing through Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey. The same with Brian Flynn, who was his youth guru at the time. Brian told me a brilliant story about how, believe it or not, Gareth wasn't wanted by Wales schools, or he wasn't picked by Wales schools. And a year and a bit later, he's picked in the Wales senior team. He goes on to become the greatest player for his country that we've known. Just an extraordinary story. But as soon as Brian set sight on him as a 16-year-old, he took him into, he told me a story about an under-17s tournament that he took him to in Cyprus. So it was Wales, Cyprus, Spain, and there was another country that I can't remember at the moment who it was, but he explained that to save on costs, UEFA encouraged countries to share hotels, and Wales were in with the Spanish. And Bale, as a 16-year-old, tore apart that tournament. He absolutely ripped Spain apart when he played against them. And on the final night, a couple of they were quite elderly Spanish coaches. They were the ones who brought through the golden generation that won the Euros and the World Cup. So Xavi, Iniesta, Sergio Ramos, Piqué, all those players. And they came up to Brian and asked him via a translator if they had his permission to alert Real Madrid and Barcelona to this Gareth Bale kid who was just 16 then. And Brian said, "Look, it's not my job to give you permission. It's not my right to give you permission, but I will alert Southampton, who Gareth played for at the time, to expect to see Real Madrid coaches as scouts at their games in the future. So at that stage, he's pointing out how Real Madrid knew about Gareth Bale as a 16-year-old, if you like, and I suppose it's inevitable that he was to go on and join them for a world record fee at the time. John Ford was the FAW chief who sort of took the association on, if you like, sort of modernised it, took into the 21st century. He was behind the appointments of Gary Speed and Ryan Giggs as manager. He's gone into quite a lot of detail about the phone calls he took, revealing the devastating news of what happened. And obviously, the Ryan situation was nowhere near as grave as what happened with Gary. But nonetheless, Wales were in limbo because Giggsy was innocent until proven guilty in the eyes of the law. And yet he had to stand aside with Rob Page as temporary manager for the best part of 2 years and 26 matches. What an invidious position the FAW were in, because clearly they wanted Ryan to return, but how could he with charges hanging over him? And of course, Ryan, not guilty verdicts were formally brought in down the line, it goes without saying. But what an impossible position Ford in the FAW and Wales were put in at the time, if you like. That sort of thing doesn't happen to other countries, Simon. And yet with Wales, there have been all these surreal moments, if you like, which, suddenly things are going well. Wales under Giggs had lost just one game in 11 against England at Wembley in a friendly. They were really going places. And then suddenly Paul Ford has to pick up the devastating piece about what happened. With Gary, and I knew Gary really well, and some of the contributions about Gary in the book. He would sort of talk to me and invariably say something like, "Oh, at the end, a good little scoop you've got there, isn't it?" They'd won 4 out of the last 5 games, rampaged up the FIFA rankings in record fashion, so much so that Wales were officially ranked fastest mover of the year under FIFA. Just battered Norway 4-1 at Cardiff City Stadium. Bale and Ramsey were just beginning to razzle dazzle. And then came that devastating news, which John Ford heard via Cheshire Constabulary, which Wales had to own that news, obviously, before the eye of the storm sort of engulfed everything, if you like. Just some fascinating insight he's given about, why he personally went for these two as manager, how he was left and Wales were left to pick up the pieces. And then the current FAW boss, Noel Mooney, has spoken to me in lovely terms about the new era, if you like. And Craig Bellamy, who he describes as a football genius, who he reckons will go on to manage one of the biggest clubs in the world one day. We'll see about that, obviously. It goes without saying, but Craig's had a decent start. Okay, things haven't gone well in the last camp, but he's had a decent start as manager. So we go from the start with Terry Yorath, just before that sliding doors moment against Romania, but including that, obviously, through, so the peaks, the troughs, right through to Craig today, if you like.
It's interesting. You mentioned Jonathan Ford. I'm really fascinated by that modernization or that change behind the scenes at the FAW, because it did feel a bit chaotic at times back in the day. But obviously, Jonathan Ford and then Noel Mooney have taken the FAW forward to new levels, I think, in terms of facilities and the way that it's run. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, obviously, the 2016 run. And like I said, I think, you're going to have a lot of behind the scenes insight there, as you mentioned, from Osher and Roberts. But what about the Russia playoff with under Mark Hughes? Because that was another missed opportunity where, you really felt like Wales could qualify from that playoff. And I always remember Robert Earnshaw on the right wing for that game. And it was just, it just felt like another missed opportunity for Wales.
Well, Robert Earnshaw, he may have come on the right wing, but he didn't start. And this is one of the tales I tell in the book. Actually, I had let's say it, words with Sparky afterwards, because Wales had done the hard part. They'd drawn 0-0 on a bitterly cold afternoon in Moscow. I remember how long it took. I used to travel with the team back then, which obviously gives me a greater insight as well. And I remember how long it took to get through Moscow Airport, and again how long it took to get back out of Moscow Airport. So it wasn't an easy trip by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, I was there. I sort of experienced it. And then, nonetheless, the players are putting a battling performance, 0-0, traded a few punches of their own, but they've done the hard work, and they returned to the Millennium Stadium, sellout crowd 4 days later to win the game and go through to the Euros. And I felt Mark was really negative in his tactics that night. It was crying out for Rob Earnshaw to start the game. He was on fire at the time. I think he'd scored. It was a November game, and I think Ernie had already scored something like 20 goals for club and country that season. Absolutely on fire at the time. So, but he stuck with the same team that had drawn 0-0 in Russia. And I felt that was negative. He should have left out Andy Johnson from the midfield and picked Rob Earnshaw instead. And they got gone for the jugular, because I really think that night it was a really partisan crowd. And I think that Russia might have wilted if Wales had got an early goal. Instead, it was Russia. Wales sort of handed the initiative to them, if you like, and were too negative. And I remember I was critical of what I thought was a massive opportunity blown. And Mark, when we next met up just before he was leaving, it was as manager, he went on to become Blackburn manager and sort of left Wales after a couple of losses to England and Poland. And he felt that I was being too negative in my reporting. And earlier on, we'd had an exchange of views about that Russia game, let's put it that way. His counter to me was, how many centre forwards do you want on the pitch, Paul? I finished with 4. And I think that was alluding to the fact that, as well as John Hartson and Ryan Giggs, who started the game, he sent on Ernie and Nathan Blake, I think it was. But it was too late then. Wales were chasing the game, nerves had set in, and it was too late. And what I would say is that only Mark can answer honestly if he had his time again, if he would have picked the same team, or if he had started Ernie. But what I can say is that Ernie started the next 2 games. He scored a hat-trick against Scotland in one of them, and he scored the winner, I think it was against Hungary, in the next one after that as well, or it might have been Croatia, next one after that. So I think that sort of tells a tale, really.
Yeah, I mean, Ernie was on fire at the time, wasn't he? He was coming off the back of a lot of goals, and it felt like a game that ultimately we'd done the hard bit, which was go to Russia and get the draw. So yeah, there's so many obviously stories and insight that you're able to give that people won't be aware of from all these different times. And like the Vinnie Jones one fascinates me. Just listening to Neville Southall talk about it last week it sort of tickled my interest, because it just seems like such a random decision to bring him in and to make him captain. And it's those, like you said a bit earlier, it only seems to happen to Wales, like these outside the box, strange decisions, stories, sometimes, traumatic, whatever it may be. Like, it's never, ever boring. And I'm assuming that, when you were traveling with the team and when you were doing all these things, it was like a constant, there was always constantly something happening or something going wrong or right.
Yeah, as I say, you just go with the flow at the time. But when you, story by story, it's your job. But when you package it all together 30 years on, you just realise it's utterly surreal. In terms of Vinny, there's a little Cardiff City twist to this, actually. So when Vinny was first called into the squad, he actually travelled from Wimbledon, training immediately after training with Wimbledon, to Cardiff Central train station to meet me for an interview about, why he wanted to play for Wales, throwing himself into it. He discovered a maternal grandmother from North Wales. He tried to play for Ireland because he had Irish ancestry as well, but that didn't work out. So he threw his lot in with Wales, and to be fair to Vinny, he learned the anthem. He seemed thoroughly committed to the whole thing. I think he won. He was captain game against the Netherlands, and I think he won 9 caps in total, as I recall, and he wasn't on the winning side once. But Gary Speed used to speak highly of him. Gary was with him at Leeds, obviously. But 2 or 3 years ago, I was outside Vicarage Road for a night game. Cardiff were playing Watford away, and my son suddenly said to me, "Oh, there's that actor there, Dad." And I looked. I said, "Oh, that's Vinnie Jones." Now I hadn't seen Vinnie for since those Wales days. So you're talking 25 years or so. And I said, "Vinnie, I used to report on you back in the day for Wales. So what's your name?" And I told him. And I could tell he didn't remember me at all. But how's he going to remember Paul Abandonado of the Welsh Press when he subsequently went on to star with Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie and become a Hollywood A-lister almost, if you like. So there's a surreal tale in its own right, that a captain of Wales for a game that they've lost 7-1, a embarrassing hiding, goes on to become a Hollywood star. Side, there's another surreal twist. But anyway, we chatted for ages about what happened, the good old days or the bad old days, whichever way you want to view it. And you could see his Welsh, how much he loved pulling on that red shirt at the time. Anyway, as we parted company, I shouted after him, "Remember now, Vinny, support the Welsh team tonight." And he just turned around, looked at me, smiled, and he said, "I can't, mate. I was born just 20 yards over there." Pointed to it. Well, it was a lovely little twist, if you like.
So, before we kind of talk about Cardiff and go into that, I've got so many different questions. Like so many different questions about the book. And then I've also got about 1 million questions I want to ask you about the current Cardiff situation. But if you had one thing that you wanted people to take away from this book, what would you think you would pick? Or what would you say is the one thing you'd like people to take away from the book?
That it is a football story like no other. Football is littered with incredible tales. Leicester winning the Premier League, Greece the Euros. We've had Eric Cantona kung fu kicks. All sorts of things have happened. We've had Wimbledon, including Vinny beating Liverpool, the Crazy Gang beating Liverpool's brilliant Culture Club in 1988 at Wembley to win the FA Cup. But in terms of a true roller coaster that is full of drama, surreal tales, and ups and downs that a Hollywood scriptwriter would struggle to write, I don't think anything matches this Wales story of the last 30 years, Si. And I think just, wow, when you look back, wow, this really is a truly incredible, unique football story in its own right. And I suppose, if just to wind up, if you like, on the book, I'm just in a fortunate position to be able to write it because I transcended what I would call 2 eras of journalism. So in more recent times, it's been the digital dominated era, online. But when I first started covering Wales, newspapers were king. You didn't have a plethora of press officers or sub-press officers, as the great Peter Jackson of the Daily Mail once dubbed them. So it would be absolutely nothing for me to pop along to training and just say, "Hey, Rushy, hey, Sparky, any chance for a quick word, please?" And you just stand on the side of the pitch and interview them, and you'd have a one-to-one rapport. You'd have their phone number, so you could ring up or have a chat about various things. And in those circumstances, the character of the player and the manager really comes out. You can go on and off the record, but they can actually guide you about the true feeling within the dressing room on certain issues, if you like. It's very different today. It's much greater array of barriers have been put between sports journalists and sports stars and managers. Things are done in a live fashion at press conferences these days. You don't really get the opportunities for the kind of one-to-ones that we had back in the day, if you like. Certainly don't travel with the team like we did, which increases the rapport. So I'm just able, I'm in a fortunate position to be able to tell these stories because I actually had that original. I was actually intrinsically involved in that original era, if you like, of journalism.
Of course, yeah, it's a whole different thing, isn't it? When you've got that rapport with the people that you're speaking to, because they trust you and they're more comfortable with you and the way they speak. Whereas these days, because of that separation, and the players are media trained and the rest of it, it's very difficult to build that rapport individually. Paul, excuse me, sorry. You've written books on Nigel Owen, Barry John, of course, Gary Speed. You've now got In the Dragon's Den. Any plans to write any more?
There is another Wales one that the publishers want from me, but that's another time. Yeah, I've actually got a contract. The next big project is actually a Cardiff City book.
Okay.
The same sort of concept, if you like. So I've actually got a contract with a leading sports publishing group who were going to bring the book out to coincide. It's just complete coincidence with the 100-year anniversary of Cardiff winning the FA Cup. And the initial working title is something like Bigger Than Barca, which is obviously Sam Hammam's famous comment, although he's adamant he never actually said that. He said as big as Barca. But the subheads, I think, says it all. The scarcely believable stories from 30 years of covering one of football's true sleeping giants. So again, Cardiff is another surreal story. It really is.
Oh my God, there's so many crazy stories, though, isn't there, from Cardiff over the years? Jesus.
Talk about ups and downs. So I'll be getting my teeth into that properly. There's a lot of promotion to do for this in the next few weeks, nationally as well as locally, if you like. So there's a lot of promotion to do. But once that's out of the way, I'll be getting my teeth into the Cardiff project, and there's a lot of people that I've already set up for interviews there, just as I did with the Wales one as well. So that's something to get excited about. And again, I think that once again, it's the same with the Wales thing. You go with the flow at the time, story by story, but week by week, but packaging it all together as a 30-year tale. Again, I think it will make for an incredible roller coaster read of what happened with Wales's capital football club.
100%, mate. I really look forward to that. And like I said, I'm getting stuck into In the Dragon's Den. People can buy In the Dragon's Den at yolfa.com, Waterstones and other leading booksellers, bookstores online everywhere. You can see the address going across the bottom of the screen there as well, and I'll drop it in the description as well so people can get a copy. But it's an incredible read, and I certainly look forward to the next one. So before we flip to the Cardiff sort of talk, I wanted to ask you about this, because we never shy away from comments or things that we've said and then people bring it back up. But JT said right at the start of the show, he said, Bellamy is a dreadful manager, Paul, and you went way too early on cheerleading him. So I would like your response to that.
Noel Mooney, as I said, says in the book that he thinks he thinks Craig is a genius, is a football genius, and will go on to manage one of the world's biggest clubs. As I said I said earlier, right, we'll have to see on that. Well, in terms of cheerleading him, I've been cheerleading him for not just I've been cheerleading him for a number of years. As with Ryan Giggs, I just feel with Craig, there's a good manager in the making there. Like Giggs has imploded. Craig, okay, things have gone wrong recently, but I think Craig, isn't Craig doing a remarkable job with Wales? I've talked about these players from yesteryear of Rush and Hughes and Southall and Giggs and more recently Bale and Aaron Ramsey. And then, you've had Gary Speed, you've had Bellamy himself, you've had John Hartson, who was a super centre forward for Wales. This squad of players doesn't begin to compare with the talent of yesteryear. So Craig's working with a pretty limited pretty limited options, I feel, if we're being brutally honest. He took over a squad of players who were largely playing in the Championship or the lower divisions. A few are now Premier League regulars. But he, up until this season, if you like, I think Craig did a pretty decent job with Wales. So I think it's, okay, things went horribly wrong against England at Wembley. They were always going to. We were going to lose that game 3-0, whether they scored in the first 20 minutes or whether they scored to the end, as far as I'm concerned. Belgium was very disappointing. Belgium away, Wales were 3-0 down and clawed it back to 3-3 with some scintillating attacking football before losing to De Bruyne moment of magic in the end. I mean, I've seen a lot of people start to turn on Craig, but I think it's too early to judge. So yeah, I have been a cheerleader. I'll continue to be a backer of his for the time being, but I also think that he doesn't help himself, Si and JT. I think that he's had tunnel vision on certain players that he's been picking. He loves Liam Cullen as his 10. I'm used to seeing Ramsey play 10 or Mark Hughes play 10. No disrespect to Cullen. It's not his fault. He picks Josh Sheehan, Mark Harris. I'm not convinced about the international credentials of some of the players he picks. And then on the other side, he's ignored Ruben Cole, who I think Ruben's talents are perfectly suited to international football, where it's not about consistency, it's about moments of brilliance at the highest level that you're capable of. So where the technical level is so much higher. So I don't think Craig is helping himself with what I regard as his tunnel vision, but I think by and large, JT, Craig's done a decent job so far as manager of Wales.
Interesting. So yesterday, Paul, Cardiff lost to Bolton in the dying seconds. It wasn't a particularly good performance. However, I would say I thought Bolton were the best side defensively we faced. I thought they were very, very good defensively. I didn't think either team was particularly great, but I just thought they looked different. They looked dangerous on the break. We did not. We looked really poor in the final third. We worked some good positions, but weren't ultimately able to do anything with it. But I think, look, in my opinion, and some people will agree, some people will disagree. My opinion is when you've got a young squad, you have to expect peaks and troughs, ups and downs. And that comes with the territory when you've got a few players who are in their first season of football. However, I don't disagree that we don't always utilize the ball in the final third as well as we could. You've got Yusuf Salic stood in the box and you don't cross the ball in, or if you're on the edge of the box and you don't take the opportunity to shoot and you try and pass through a crowd of players, then I do understand that frustration. I don't have a problem with people being critical of performances. What I find a bit mind-boggling is that we're top of the league and we haven't anywhere near hit top gear. The attacking. I had a note made down, which I didn't mention in my earlier video, which was when you're a new manager or a new coach and you're building, a team, the final piece in the jigsaw and the hardest bit to do or to get right is the attacking patterns and the attacking chemistry between the players and the final ball, because that's the final thing which will click. And I think you could look around the Premier League at the moment and you're starting to see that in action. But I was speaking to a current coach in the Championship yesterday, and they were saying, you can see the semblances of what he's trying to do, and you can see what they're trying to build. They're just not quite getting that final ball, that final delivery to create the chances. Now, I think the international breaks have harmed us momentum-wise, both of them. But I also think that is by no means the end of the world. I think we'll get better as the season goes. I also believe that we'll probably bring in a player or two in January, and having Alex Robertson back is definitely a benefit. But where do you stand, mate, on yesterday's performance and just the overall reactions that you see?
Well, yesterday's performance was poor. I don't think we can dress it up. In fact, a lot of the recent performances have been poor. And if we're going to be negative, I could argue, well, it reminds me a bit of Errol Bullitt, who started really well and suddenly it just fell off a cliff for whatever reason. I don't think this is anywhere like that, by the way, but there's an analogy to be made there because some of the recent performances have been poor. It wasn't just yesterday. You could argue yesterday was coming. I you said at the start there about inconsistency. I've been quite consistent in that myself, that with such a young squad, there will be ups and downs. It goes with the team. When I used to cover Wales under John Toshack, they would produce some incredible results and then have some woeful performances. It happens with young kids until you get the consistency which comes with experience. So the experience they're gaining this year is absolutely invaluable in terms of what the future holds for Cardiff City. If it was a 30-game season, there would be a lot of optimism that Cardiff could potentially win the league, but it's not. It's a 46-game season. There's all the cup games. There's 2 of them coming up now against Wrexham and Peterborough, back to back. So I'm a bit more philosophical, if you like, about the ups and downs that we can expect, not just in terms of results, but in terms of performance levels as well. What I found alarming about Bolton was Cardiff started this season. We all know that Cardiff have lacked pace in the team in recent years. It's almost been criminal that it's not been addressed properly, Simon, and it still wasn't addressed properly in the summer. Now, Barry Murphy tried to address it to a degree where he brings people like Ronan Kabakio in the team, for example. He brings a bit of zip at right back, but you need the pace in the wide areas up front in the final third where Bolton had it. You need the extra zip in those areas, and Cardiff have never really addressed that. But they kind of made up for that at the start of the season by zipping the ball around with real tempo, with real purpose. And the concern yesterday was it was back to the bad old days of passing, if not without a purpose, pass slow, ponderous, pedantic. It wasn't troubling the Bolton defence at all. I'll give you one example where I think it was about 10 minutes in, and Bolton had a corner, and David Turnbull did really well to win a tackle or something on the edge of the box, and he charged out with the ball. And so you've got most of the Bolton team are taken out of the game here, and he got close to the centre circle. It done really well, and he just stopped, slowed, and played it all the way back again. And I just, that's exactly what I'm talking about. This sort of lack of oomph, this lack of tempo, where it's crying out for the ball to go to a couple of fast wingers who then keep the attack going, if you like. So they've stopped playing the ball, they've stopped zipping it around, the 1-2s and putting players beyond, stretching, whether it's the fullback or the wide man, actually stretching defences, getting beyond them, pulling the ball back. So I think it was the ponderous nature of the play, particularly in the final, but it wasn't just in the final third, Simon. I know Barry Murphy has specifically spoken about that, and not shooting or crossing when opportunities were there was a prevalent of that, if you like. But it's also been slow and ponderous in other areas as well before you even get that far, which it reminded me of what used to happen under Rees and Bullitt, that you get the ball, you start a counter, and it's so slow that the opposition are able to get all their players back into their defensive positions, and suddenly the space is closed down. So I still feel that I've argued this long and hard, and you'll know this from private chats we've had and things I've said on here, that Cardiff needed a dominant centre half this season. But to be fair, Wolfish and Lawler has emerged, so it's sort of that one has been negated a bit more, if you like. They definitely needed a real dominant, bossy figure at 6, as far as I'm concerned, who could really control the tempo of games. And they needed at least one, if not 2, really fast wingers, particularly if Ruben Cole was going to be your kingpin, because you've got to surround Ruben with legs, because Ruben's not the quickest himself. I know he sort of won the bleep test this summer and he was closing down a lot yesterday, but he needs pace around him on the outside around him. Salek isn't the quickest up front. So my concern with Cardiff is that with Kellyman, who looks decent, and Willock, they're not really wingers. You can almost argue that Kellyman, Willock, and Ruben are all tens, if you like, in the way they play the game. Willock, to be fair, has got to the byline a few times this season, and he's done okay. But Cardiff have not got the flyers that I think they need down the flanks, the direct flyers that they need down the flanks to take players on and get the ball across to Salek. And I suppose that when you have a ponderous performance like we saw at Bolton, these issues spring to mind for me.
Yeah, and I think the amount of times last year where we would work a good position and, like you say, players would be out of position, and it's one of my pet hates this year at times, is if you work a triangle or a 1-2 or someone drops a shoulder and they beat their man, or you turn the ball over and there's 3 players in front of the ball, they're out of position. So utilize that, but you've got to move the ball quickly to do so. Is when we then go back and let them get back into position. It's infuriating. Now, I think the biggest and only issue in terms of at the moment we can't sign anyone. So I'm just talking about the squad as is. I think the biggest issue we've got is the things that we were doing well pre first international break. We are not doing anymore, such as we're not moving the ball quickly. We're not moving off the ball as much as we were, the rotations and people getting beyond. I've noticed that the diagonal balls are starting to become less and less. I don't really remember any yesterday. Whereas, you go to the start of the season, that was almost our game plan, was the wingers were, right on the touchline. We'd work the ball one way, work the ball the other way, and then Will Fish or Wintle or whoever would, spread it to the winger and we would catch teams out that way. We've kind of stopped doing that. And then we don't play to the strengths of the players in our team who are going to do the damage, whether that's Ruben having runners beyond him and around him, whether that's, Callum Robinson wanting the ball to feet or him, in front, in behind. If Yusuf Salic is in the team, he wants a nice whipped in cross. He doesn't want a floated up ball where he's got a battle with the centre half, and we're not playing to our strengths. However, I did a Wrexham show just a bit earlier on, and we would sort of talk in, and they asked me what I thought Cardiff's best performance of the season was. And I actually picked out the Burnley game. Now, I know Burnley made changes, but Burnley, a Premier League team recently, and I thought we absolutely dominated them. But we dominated them by moving the ball quickly, by pressing high. And when we did turn the ball over, we threatened because we used it and we got in behind. Now, you could argue the more the season's gone, there's more footage of us, so teams are working us out. But I just think that we've lost a little bit of tempo, generally speaking. And I think that's the biggest disappointment I've got, is the lack of tempo. I think if we can find a bit more higher tempo, a bit more zip, as you put it, I don't think we're far off. Especially, I think Alex Robertson coming back in could be really beneficial. He's obviously going to take a couple of games to get up to sort of match fitness. But for me, I think he offers way more than David Turnbull on and off the ball. Way more. But yeah, I understand the frustration. What I don't understand is it's kind of like the overreactions and panicking, because I just think, you look at the way the fans reacted to Mafiko on his debut when he had a difficult time. I just think that this team at this present moment, they just need the fans to get behind them, and maybe that helps them find that sort of mojo and that zip. But a couple of questions for you, Paul, from the people, as it were. Ryan says, "What's your thoughts on David Turnbull?"
I'm terribly disappointed. I don't think that Turnbull was anywhere as near as negative previously as he's looked this season. For whatever reason, he's going backwards. I can only presume it's under manager's instructions. He's going backwards and sideways way too often. I was watching, once or twice the ball was played up to Salek yesterday, and he's flicking it on. I'm thinking, what's the point of that? Ruben's too far away from him to get there, and Turnbull's not going to break the lines to get there. Joel Colwell might be capable of it. Alex Robertson might be capable of it, but I don't see Turnbull doing it. So I think he's a very good technical player. I just think, like you, that Robertson and Joel, and I would throw Joel Colwell into this mix as well. I just think they will offer the team more.
Absolutely. I also think David Turnbull could be a valuable squad member off the bench. Like if you need to come on and you need to just keep possession of the ball and see a game out, I think he's good for that. I don't think he's dynamic enough to be the number 8, and I don't think he's moves the ball quick enough to be the number 6. He wants a few too many touches, which then slows down the play. The other question, which someone asked was, Halftime Oranges said, question for Paul. What does he think Vincent Tan's thoughts will be on BBM and the performances thus far?
That's a really, really good question. It's I've normally answers sort of spring to mind straight away for me, but that's more of a struggle because I haven't spoken to anybody about the last time I had a conversation, which was probably about 3 weeks ago. I was being told that Vincent is very happy with things, but I mean, listen, we can laugh about it, but Tan wants X number of shots per game. Something like 40 shots per game. I know it's incredibly naive, right? The more likely you are, I remember him saying this to me, that you're more likely to score if you're trying to shoot than if you're not trying to shoot. So was there one shot on target yesterday? So he's not going to be happy with that, is he?
No. So let me sort of phrase it like a little bit differently. Will he look at the league table, see where we are, be happy, or will he have paid attention to recent performances and be concerned, do you think?
Probably a mix of the two, but you can't not be happy with the league table, can you? We've always, the argument about Tan is that he becomes, a lot of us feel, rightly or wrongly, that he's been too distant, too disillusioned with the club. And that apathy, in my opinion, has permeated all the way down in recent seasons, which led to the relegation last season.
Mm-hmm.
But the people close to Tan always say to me, you know what Vincent is like. If we ever have a sniff of the top 6 or promotion, he suddenly becomes re-engaged. He's ready to open the checkbook, and so he'll be more than happy that the league table shows Cardiff at top at the moment. Whether he has the football nuance to understand that recent performances suggest that might not last, I guess only Tan himself can answer. What my view of Cardiff, as I said, as well as experience with the younger players, is that they will win a lot of matches at Cardiff City Stadium this season with the fervent backing of 20,000 fans. A lot of matches will be won, and the crowd will play a huge part in that, driving these younger players over the line. And that is by and large happening, Simon, already, I think. Burton was a bit of a shock. Well, huge shock. Bradford was a bit of a shock, less so than Burton. But by and large, Cardiff are winning the home games, which is exactly what happened under Malky Mackay and Neil Warnock. It's how many away games we can win that will determine how that final table looks for Cardiff, if you like. And
we haven't lost many away games, Paul.
No, I know, but you need to. I mean, somebody told me a crazy stat that Reading had, prior to being beaten 2-1 last weekend, Reading had only lost one game in the league since early August or something, and yet they were 21st in the table. So I can only presume they've drawn pretty much every game.
Yeah,
so
they've drawn a lot of games.
You need to win with 3 points for a win side. You need to win games rather than just draw them. A 0-0 would have been a good result yesterday, I feel. That last minute goal was an absolute kick in the teeth. It was a worldie, but I think Bolton deserved it. I think they were the better team, and I don't think Cardiff can have any complaints about losing that game, even in the manner that it happened.
No, I thought, do you know what? I thought we showed a real naivety in injury time at different points. you know, Capaccio gets fouled on the left wing just inside their half, and it's 92 minutes on the clock. So what you do is you load up their box, you put the ball into their box. If something comes of it, great, but you're running down the clock at the same time. We kind of go short, we lose it, and they're on the break. Then literally after Trott has made a save from that break, I think it's young Naikawa wins the ball, does well, you know, tenaciously wins the ball and tries to play a ball right across the middle of the pitch with his with his weaker foot. That gets cut out, and then they score from the break. Now, I'm not by any means blaming him. He's a kid, and I know what, you know, if he pulls that pass off, we're on the break and Ruben's running at their defense. But it's probably a mixture of immaturity in terms of age of the squad, but it's those little decisions in injury time, you know, away to Bolton, who haven't lost at home all season. A point is a good result. So those little naive, small margins over the season.
This is exactly what I was saying about the inconsistency of youth. This is all about a learning curve for them. But where I've been consistent, I've said, because I understand this, and a lot of us understand this, a lot of fans understand this as well, that there will be ups and downs with such a young squad. And you've just given an example of two very young players there. What they desperately needed was to sign a couple of real battle-hardened warriors this summer to get them through through the spine of the team, hence the 6 and the potential centre half. And it didn't happen. And Cardiff have got to take responsibility for that. So when that ball was given away, they've carried the ball about 50 yards after that without a challenge, Simon. This is where an experienced person comes in and stamps it out and stops that from happening at source.
Yeah, of course, you take a foul if nothing else. Like, you stop it so they don't get near the box. And then then when he gets it, you know, he's given you a warning. The same player 2 or 3 minutes earlier, where Trotter saved it. Don't let him get a shot away on his stronger foot. You know, you've got to close him down, and I don't know. It's frustrating because we probably didn't deserve a point, but we had a point within our grasp, and it would have been a very good point. Geraint says, if you want consistency, stop making 4 or 5 changes every game. So what I would add to that, Paul, is I do feel that our inconsistent period started where we started to mix the back 4 up a little bit. And we started to do what we did last year, change the centre-back pairings, change the spine of the team. Whereas when we had sort of kept it generally the same, you know, maybe the odd change in the wing wide areas, we were on a bit of a run and we had that consistency. Do you agree with that? Or do you think you have to rotate all the time?
No, I think you have to rotate to a degree because of there's a lot of young players in this team. They need to be taken in and out. But where you need the consistency is at centre half. And I've never known any football team change its centre half as much as Cardiff have centre half pairing as much as Cardiff have this season. One would presume, I mean, Callum Chambers is the captain. So as the captain, presumably he would be first choice, but that clearly hasn't happened. Dylan Lawler to me is the best of them, but he has had injuries and he needs to be taken in and out a little bit as well because of his age. Will Fisher surprised me with how good he is, but maybe it's the level. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice there, but he has surprised me this season. The one we all had such high hopes of was Osho. So one presumes that Lawler and Osho was going to be the centre-back pairing, and that was it. And however tough that was on Fish, and whatever that meant for the captain, that's the way forward. But Osho has had a few brain fades and implosions, which have cost goals. So the best pairing has been Lawler and Fish. But where does that leave the captain, and where does it leave Osho, who came here under a real hurrah as you know, how the heck has Cardiff land a player of this quality, Premier League potential, and so on. So I can understand the inconsistency, if you like, but I don't think it helps.
I think Osho will come good. I do. Maybe not this season, but he will. I do think he'll come good. You could see there's a player there but you can also see he is scarred by some of the mistakes he's made. But much like Callum Chambers did when he made a mistake in the cup against, who was it? I forget. It was the one goal we conceded from open play in the first part of the season where he's on his own and he sort of concedes, loses the ball and they score. Forget the team now.
Charlton, wasn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And what Callum Chambers did, in great fairness to him, is he went away, got his head down, sat out, several games while Dylan Lawler and Will Fish did very, very well, came back and he looked more like the player we thought we were signing when we signed him. Now, I still think that Will Fish and Dylan Lawler are the best combination that we have for centre-back. I think they complement each other so well. They like playing together. Why change it unless you have to? This is an interesting one. Gavin says, would you take Aaron Ramsey back in January if the opportunity arose?
This is spooky because I don't know who Gavin is, but I was having this exact conversation last night with somebody. This exact conversation.
Me too.
Yes, I would. And do you know why? Because, I mentioned I think Ruben Colwill had a poor game yesterday by his standards, okay? But what it underlined to me is that how reliant Cardiff have been on Ruben, really, for most of the season for the creativity, because they lack the flying wingers that they should have signed in the summer. And I've always felt that, you can debate the Robinson Salek thing, who's better choice there. You look at the centre halves, you can look at NGV Kapaki, you can look at the midfielders, but I've always felt the one player that you can't replace in that team is Colwill. And Ramsey would offer that creative gift, if you like, that others can't. So I would take him back, yeah.
I'm not sure. I see the benefits of it, but I don't know. If he can stay fit, of course, is an intelligent and good signing. But my worry, I said in my video earlier, Paul, Cardiff's biggest problem for me, apart from the tempo and these sort of things, is if Ruben doesn't play well, we don't do much. Whether that's a 20-minute period to win a game when we come back against Leyton Orient and he drops a bit deeper, or he scores goals at the start of the season, we seem to be dependent on him. I'm not saying he's been fantastic every game. What I'm saying is Cardiff tend to do well when Ruben plays well. Ruben plays well when he's got certain players around him, but we don't always put the right players around him. We need somebody else, because ultimately, Paul, Ruben, Joel Bagan, Ryan Wintle were the ones early in the season who were just playing every minute of every game in every competition. They simply can't do that. We must find a way to rotate those three players. Joel Bagan in particular, I think, is an issue. I think he's injured now. Got to find a way to rest them. Got to, because they will just burn out. And I think Ruben, the last two games, has looked a bit mentally fatigued. So I would, as much as I want to see him play on Tuesday against Wrexham, because I have a team in mind I would like to play, I'd be tempted to put Ashford in there, or Kellyman, or Willock even, just to give Ruben a break. But on the Wrexham game, or actually, before I ask you that, what is your best 11 for Cardiff? Like, if you were picking an 11 now for us to play tomorrow, which is the way to get the best and get us back to playing how we were at the end of the season, what is your 11 from our squad now?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
See, so that's where me and you differ. I don't think it's a difficult question.
Well, you tell me yours and I'll tell you where I would change it.
So I would go Trott, Bagan, Fish, Lawler, Capaccio.
Okay, stop there quickly. I would agree with all of that, but I'm still not convinced that Osho is not better than Fish. So even though all the evidence tells us contrary at the moment,
well,
I think that Osho there's a player in Osho and it's just got to come out in him. But I don't disagree with what you're saying there. Midfield three?
So there's one position in there which I'm not sure of, simply because I personally haven't seen him play in the role. So Brian Barry Murphy is convinced that Alex Robertson is a very, very good 6. So if he's a very, very good 6, I would go Robertson, Joel, Ruben. However,
100%.
However, because I don't know if Alex Robertson is capable of playing that 6, my counter to that is Joel can also play the 6. So I'd still play those 3. I think they give you the energy, the quality, and the technical ability.
No, you can't do that with Joel Colwell. So one of Joel Colwell's greatest strengths is that, like a young Aaron Ramsey, he breaks the lines all the time. He's the one who can get beyond the defense and stretch them. You can't do that as a 6.
But,
he needs to be
either way, they would be my midfield 3.
Yeah,
Robertson,
I agree.
And the Colwells.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And
then,
so I would go with Callum Robinson at the moment through the middle, on form and the fact that we haven't got a blistering winger who's going to beat his fullback and whip the ball in. We're looking more for little 1-2s and stuff like that. So that's why I would go with Callum Robinson. I would go with Isaac Davis, and I would go with probably Kean Ashford, although I accept, and that's mainly because Willock's injured, isn't he? He's got a quad injury. But Willock and Ashford for me is a toss of a coin. But Isaac Davis would play for me because he's the one winger we have who's electric. And Kellyman is pushing as well. I still think Kellyman's not quite fit. And I think I do think he'll be flying by Christmas, but he's not quite there yet. That would be my 11 that I would pick. And I would love to see us play that 11 against Wrexham on Tuesday, but we won't because we'll rotate, which I understand. But I'm interested in how you would try and get our zip back in terms of personnel.
Well, I think it comes from that midfield. I think that midfield changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Davis it's no good having Davis if they're not going to utilize his pace properly. But I agree that he needs to play because he's the one who does bring real pace on the wing. I would stick with Salek personally, but the Salek Robinson argument is a 50-50 call. It's a toss of a coin for me. They're both very, very capable players. I think Cardiff needs to sign another winger.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think they need to sign a fast, direct, tricky winger who can get to the byline and get crosses into Salek.
So let me ask you a question about that then. So Nayaka Hawa yesterday, he beat his fullback, I think, 2 or 3 times, and then the cross or the pass wasn't quite good enough. But then another couple of times he tried to beat the fullback and physically wasn't able to, and the fullback held him off. And he didn't quite look as if he was physically able to compete with him. At the start of the season, Nayaka Hawa was going to go on loan, and the manager asked him to stay. Do you think, in hindsight, and it's always easy with hindsight, right? But do you think with hindsight, we should have let Nayaka Hawa go on loan and brought in someone who was a little bit more first team ready with the same sort of skill set in terms of big, pacey, skillful, direct? I think we miss Ollie Tanner as well, which, is interesting.
Yes, but it's not with hindsight, Si. That should have, whether Nayaka went on loan or not, that profile of a player that you're talking about needed to come in. There's nothing hindsight about that.
So, Wrexham Tuesday is an interesting one. I think there's a little bit more pressure on it. A little bit, only a tiny bit. A little bit more pressure on it because we were so poor against Newport. Now, I know you don't give 2 hoots about the Virtue Trophy, but the fans who were there and who watched...
I was one of the fans there. I paid for my tickets that night, so go on.
And I did. I bloody paid for a ticket.
I paid for 2, but go on.
All right, I paid for 2 too. My son never pays for bloody anything. But no, look, I think that game and that performance has put a little bit more pressure on this game because I think you don't want to lose to 2 Welsh rivals so close together. Now, Wrexham, I think all the pressure's on them. They're the championship side. They've spent an absolute fortune. And interestingly, from a tactical point of view, they are our kryptonite. They're very direct. They're very physical. I don't think Kiefer Moore will play, or he certainly won't start. They'll start Broadhead, I would have thought, and they'll rotate a little bit. But they are not going to play out from the back. They're not going to, build up through the thirds so we can press them and get them in the transition. So I actually think that this Wrexham game would be a good opportunity to play Yusuf Salic and Callum Robinson together. What say you?
Why?
Because Wrexham are not going to try and play through, from the back and through the midfield. So I would argue that it's a good opportunity for you to get in. Robinson can drop in, drop in deep and help out a little bit in the midfield when needed. But I just think that Wrexham are going to bypass the midfield a lot.
I hear a lot about this Robinson Salic partnership, and I get it. I understand why. It's the goals they would offer, but you've got to get the service to them to score the goals in the first place. And I just think if that affects the blend of the rest of the team,
yeah, possibly.
What's the point in that respect? I don't buy that argument about losing to Newport and also losing to Wrexham. I don't think that'll come into anybody's thought process within the dressing room, Simon, rightly or wrongly. This is a much, much, much bigger game than that Newport game was.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Quarter-final at stake.
And it's it's being built up as a proper Welsh derby. It's because of the Hollywood glare surrounding Wrexham, there's extra impetus and extra eyes on the game as well. Cardiff are the biggest club in Wales, tangling the Hollywood team. It's got all the ingredients for a cracker, as far as I'm concerned. I think because of all that, he has to play his best team.
I hope so. I really, really hope so.
And whatever we think about the Robinson-Salic potential partnership, the fact is they've only been put together when Cardiff have been chasing, Brian Barry Murphy's been chasing games. He has his set system of 4-3-2-1, 4-2-3-1, whatever you want to call it. So I don't think we will see that unless he leaves Ruben Colwell out and plays Robinson as his 10. But I don't think Robinson is as effective as a 10 as Ruben is.
No, Robertson's best is I would like to see Robertson have a run of games as either the 6 or the 8 and actually get him playing. Now, whether he can play two games so close together after a long sort of stint out is another question. But I'd like to think he's got half in him or an hour. The people I speak to say he's very, very fit. He's got a gym and everything in his house, and he works every day. He does double training. He's ready. So I honestly would go pretty much with the team I just said to you, which is, I think that's pretty much what I would go with on Tuesday. Maybe with I think Joe Bagan probably is out. So maybe you go Pacquiao on the left and NG on the right or something like that. But I would try and play that midfield. I would love to see a Robertson Colwell brothers midfield on Tuesday, even if it's just for a half or for an hour. I would love to see it.
I think it's unlikely, Simon. I think
me too.
I think Wintle is likely to start.
Yeah, and Chambers. I think Chambers will come in as well.
I was about to say I wouldn't rule out a return for Chambers. I'm not sure where your Kiefer Moore info comes from. I thought he would start this game, in which case he might think
they got a game on Friday in the league against Coventry. Yeah, and so they were saying that these journalists who I was on the podcast with earlier, they basically just said that they've kind of indicated that he will play, but he'll come off the bench for after an hour. Seems to be their information. And Broadhead's been in good form, in fairness to him, so I think it's probably an opportunity to give him a run out.
Broadhead's a tidy player. He's a very tidy
like him.
player. I've watched him quite a lot with Wales through the age grade system and so on. He's a very different player to Kiefer. He'll offer a very different challenge to the centre backs. But I'd like to think that Cardiff will just completely up the tempo for this one. start, let it be an end-to-end. When the draw was first made, I anticipated an absolute end-to-end rip draw that would probably end up 2-2 and go to penalties. They've pulled off some terrific results since then, including a draw at Middlesbrough. Whereas Cardiff's form has dipped, even if results haven't to quite the same degree. So I'd like to think that performance level can come back up again. They can get some tempo back into that midfield, into that final third, if you like, and just throw some serious punches in anger in what should be a cracking contest, which will have not just Wales captivated, but it's on ITV, I think I'm right in saying as well. So, this could be a great advert for Welsh football on nationwide TV.
Yeah, 100%. And I really hope Cardiff use it as an opportunity to try and find that early season tempo and be direct and be aggressive. Interestingly, the guys on the podcast, they said the Wrexham fans' biggest worry is that Connor Cody might come in. So Connor Cody is the highest paid player at Wrexham. He was in some poor form. He got, I can't remember the game it was now, but apparently they said he got torn apart, hasn't been seen since for the last few games. They've had an uptake in form in that time, but they expect him to start in the cup. And they're a bit concerned by that because he hasn't been too great. And they think the likes of, a Ruben or a Salic might give him a bit of trouble. I was quite surprised by that because I've always thought Connor Cody's quite a tidy defender. But granted, I haven't seen him a lot in the last couple of years. But when he came through, he was good.
Salic won't cause any problem if he's left completely isolated, which happened on Saturday. He needs those players closer to him to get onto the flick-ons, to get ready for the second balls. So Cardiff have got a lot of work to do to get more out of Yusuf, I think.
Do you know what we did, though, on yesterday, Paul, which baffled me? And we'll kind of wrap up on this. So after the Reading game, I said the one tweak I'd like to see from Brian Barry Murphy was that Joel Colwell or whoever plays in the number 8 needs to just drop a little bit deeper so there's someone to pick up the ball and we've got a little bit more security in the transition. We went from playing 5 across the front when we have the ball for the most of a season to yesterday, Yusuf just looked completely isolated on his own. It was like we went from one extreme to the other. And, I can't think that was a plan. I just think it was an off day yesterday. I'm going to have a look at Brian Barry Murphy's quotes from yesterday, but I believe he said something along the lines of, final third wasn't good enough. But I just thought generally we weren't good enough. Somehow we're top of the league. I don't quite understand how, but maybe that's an indication that League One isn't a great standard. And, if we can get a bit of a run together, we might be able to create some space between us and the other teams. But how do you feel then, Paul? Let's wrap with this. How do you feel like 13 games played, we're top of the league, we're level on points with Stevenage and Bradford. How do you feel at the moment compared to how you felt after the first couple of games? Do you think Cardiff will still get promoted? And do you think, we'll be up there or thereabouts? Do you think, I think Evan said yesterday, he thinks we're going to fall away if we keep playing the way we are? Or do you think, we'll keep just chugging along and be there or thereabouts?
Well, I've never said Cardiff will get promoted this season. I've never bought into this, we'll walk the league or that sort of business because of the inconsistency that I mentioned that we'll see with the youngsters that I mentioned earlier in the program. I am concerned at performance levels, Si. I've seen this, if a team plays really well but loses, you just know that, okay, well, that's a kick in the teeth. Play like that again, and you'll win more often than you lose, if you like, against lesser opponents. But I think some of the performance levels of late as we were talking about, have lacked tempo, have lacked conviction, have lacked creativity, and that does worry me a little bit. And I'm not convinced that that the players are going to be told to up the tempo at the moment or anything like that. I think they're playing in a style that perhaps the manager wants. Although clearly he wants far more in the final third than he got yesterday at Bolton. So the performance levels concern me a little bit. My answer is it's still too early to judge. I don't think it's a poor league. I think Cardiff in certain positions have got far more quality in certain positions than any other teams have in this league. And you'd like to think that as injuries and suspensions bite, the depth of other smaller clubs, if you like, the depth of Cardiff squads will prevail when the business end of the season kicks in the spring. But I just think it's still too early to judge. And I haven't changed my mind, Simon. What I said was a few weeks ago is that these young players have got to try and win as many home matches as possible, bank up as many points as possible, so that when they do have the kind of situation we saw yesterday, they're still in a really good position as a result of the points accrued at home. So, and I just think that continues to be the case. There's not another home game until November the 29th now. Yesterday was the first of 5 away games on the trot, I think it is, which is a brutal schedule. It'll be interesting to see where Cardiff are in the league and in the 2 cup competitions come the end of November. But there are a lot of winnable home games to come, and I just think that they've got to keep accruing those points at home, try to get what they can away from home, hopefully strengthen in the January window, and then we can maybe revisit this in late winter, early spring, and we'll have more of an idea about how things are going to realistically pan out at that stage. At the moment, I just think there will continue to be inconsistency.
Yeah, I tend to agree. When do you think our last good performance was?
You'll have to remind me of the game, Simon. I can't remember.
I was just having a look. We obviously lost to Bolton. Won against Reading. I didn't think we were particularly great.
No, that wasn't a good performance.
Newport, Leyton Orient was littered with individual errors.
That wasn't a good performance. That was the superior class that I'm talking about. And I'm talking in particular about Trott, Lawler, Colwell and Robinson. The superior class Cardiff have over other teams at this level, told with those 4 in the end in that game, and that got Cardiff through, but it wasn't a great performance. Go
on. So then before that, Burton, we lost 1-0.
Awful.
And then the 2 games before that were Wigan Athletic away, which I thought we were excellent for 90 minutes, in fairness, although we should have been a few more up at half time. And before that, Burnley. And then you've got the Bradford game.
Games, isn't it?
So Wigan and Burnley.
Yeah. Yeah. So the performance levels have dropped off, and that's a worry. That's more of a worry than results dropping off, because performance levels will indicate, results matter, of course they do, but they matter even more at the business end of the season. It doesn't matter how you play at that point. It's about getting over the line. At the moment, performances do matter because they indicate whether results will take an upturn or a downturn in the coming months. So we do need to see a turnaround in the performance levels quite quickly, I feel.
However, in October, just to put a different spin on it, October we played 3 league games, so there was 9 points available, and we picked up 6 without playing well. We didn't play well in any of those games, but we still picked up 6 points out of 9. So maybe that's the positive you take from it. And I will leave you on this, Paul, and I'll leave the people on this. Michael says, you're not playing well, or you're not playing your best. You're top of the league, and it's why I think Cardiff and Stockport will be up there. The league isn't that great. If you look at where Plymouth and Luton are, it's absolutely brutal. And as you know, come Tuesday night, mates, if things were to go our way, we could be in the quarterfinal of a cup as well. So it's not all doom and gloom.
Anything but, what I say. Absolutely. That message sums it up, as does your point about the quarterfinal of the cup. So
Indeed. Right, Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for talking about your book. Thank you for giving us your insight in Cardiff. As Halftime Oranges says there, fabulous insight and thoughts. Thank you very much. Thank you, mate. Thank you to everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're not a member, become a member. And also, where's it gone? There it is. In the Dragon's Den. by Paul Abbandonato, available at eolfa.com and other bookstores, including Waterstones, Amazon, etc. Please do get it. It's a phenomenal read, some great stories, and it is a must-have for Welsh football fans. Paul, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. All the best, everyone. Good luck against Wrexham. Bye all.
Keep the faith, and I'll see you in a bit.
This channel is powered by an incredible membership community on Cardiff City World and patreon.com/AcePodcastNation. Becoming a member unlocks exclusive rewards from early access to live event tickets, bonus content, and even the occasional inside transfer scoop when we get it. But more importantly, it allows us to bring you top quality Cardiff City content 7 days a week. Across those 7 days, we're talking match previews, exclusive interviews, instant match reactions, the breakdown podcast, tactical deep dives, the spotlight series, Bluebirds Rewind, Academy Focus, and just so much more. Led by myself, backed by an army of passionate Cardiff City fans, this is content created by fans for fans. Balanced, professional, and 100% all about the club we all love. If you enjoy what we do, then join the community today and support what we are doing as we help to keep Cardiff City World flying high.